Let's switch for a moment to the Israel Hamas conflict. And I want you to share with everyone watching at this time your perspective on the prospects for escalation. We're hearing from, no, they're very rational players at play here, and they'll find a way of ensuring that there is no further escalation. To the other side of the spectrum, which seems to believe that escalation now is inevitable.
I don't think it's inevitable. I don't think it's inevitable, but I'm very worried. Look, Hezbollah and Iran have generally been fairly careful, cautious players. What they do cleverly and surreptitiously and under the table. They don't do it overtly. But you are getting to a level of tit-for-tat violence where a miscalculation, a misperception could easily take things one step further. And most worrying, these attacks that are taking place where the Houthis are attacking commercial shipping, and then the Americans and the Brits are going and attacking the Houthis. This has a very dangerous feel to it, because I understand that the impulse. The United States, again, is trying to act as the kind of global policeman and say, look, you can't stop all global trade that goes into the Red Sea. That is, you know, that's one of the two vital choke points of traffic in the world. I mean, India's energy comes from there. On the other hand, to get into a tit-for-tat with the Houthis just feels like you're going down a dark path. The Saudi Arabians went down that path for 10 years. They bombed the Houthis. They got the UAE involved. And those guys, these are classic terrorist militia bandits. They always live to fight another day. They're launching asymmetrical operations. U.S. says we're going to destroy their capacity to wreak terror. I mean, what their capacity, you're talking about $2,000 drones, maybe sometimes $500 drones that are being launched, using an iPhone. How are you going to stop people from doing this? So, it's a dilemma. I understand why the U.S. is doing what it's doing, but I'm very worried that it can easily, it can get to a point where the U.S. feels like it's not winning, so now it has to do more. And then the Houthis keep surviving, and then the U.S. keeps doing more. And where do we go from there? The U.S. will have gotten itself involved in a war in the Middle East, where at the same time it's involved in a war in Ukraine.
So we'll come to Ukraine in a moment. How long do you see the Israel-Hamas war go on for? It almost seems as if Benjamin Netanyahu wants this war to go on for as long as possible. And the U.S., even though they're making the kind of noises that they are, aren't bearing down to get him to stop.
I agree. I think Netanyahu may even benefit from the war expanding, because it becomes more complicated, more dangerous, not a time at which you can have a change of government, not a time at which you can have elections. It's a very cynical strategy that Netanyahu is employing. What should happen is there should be a cessation, largely of military operations in Gaza. Look, they've destroyed 70% of all the buildings in northern Gaza. How much more can you destroy? What they really should have done from the start was targeted operations at the leadership, whether they're in Lebanon or not. Go after each one, hunt them down, kill them. That's what's going to have an effect on Hamas. Destroying the entire infrastructure of Gaza actually benefits Hamas, because it radicalizes the population. For every neighborhood you destroy, surely you're going to have created a couple of hundred radicalized people. So the whole strategy seems to me misguided. They should stop. They should have a ceasefire. They should go after the Hamas people in a more targeted way. But will they? No. I mean, I think that they say they're going to de-escalate, but I suspect that this will go on for a while, because it's not in the Israeli government's interests. It's not in the Prime Minister's interest to end it.
Now, 83 national security advisors were in Davos to talk about a potential Ukrainian peace plan. It seems Vladimir Zelensky is getting increasingly frustrated with the fact that the world's attention is now divided because of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and because he's not getting the kind of aid that he wanted to. How do you see the Russia-Ukraine conflict play out this year?
Look, the problem with the argument for a peace plan is very simple. The Russians are not willing to negotiate right now. Russia has made a strategic decision that it is going to hang in there. It is going to, it's doing pretty well this year. It is going to try and press its advantage. It's going to resupply itself and wait for the 2024 election. Again, we get back to that pivotal election. It's absolutely clear the Russians feel if Trump wins, he'll sell the Ukrainians down.
Will he do that? What's your sense?
You can never tell with Trump because he's such an, it's such a personalized, narcissistic foreign policy that it'll depend on whether he thinks he will look good one way or the other. So I think we can't actually tell, but I think Putin thinks he could make a deal with Trump. They know each other. We know this, that Trump admires Putin enormously. So that is the great concern, which is you're not going to get a deal this year while the Russians are waiting. But I do think that as a broader proposition, we should be thinking about a negotiated end to this war. Look, at the end of the day, Ukraine's goal should not be to recover every last square inch of territory. Ukraine's goal should be to create for itself the ability to exist as an independent, sovereign country anchored in the West, anchored in Europe, with security guarantees and membership in the European Union. You can have that whether you have 85% of Ukraine or 97% of Ukraine. Does it matter that South Korea, lost half its territory when, not half, it lost a certain amount of its territory? Does it matter that, there's so many countries in the world where the size of your territory is not what's important. What's important is what you do with it, how you invest in it. So if the Ukrainians can get EU membership, security guarantees, stable borders, that part can remain frozen and contested, and you move on.
Last year I asked you if there could be a palace coup against Putin. That's when there were some kind of coups against Putin, and he seemed to be on a sticky wicket. This year the question is, can Putin win?
Well, and if you recall, I told you there was no chance, and I think that has turned out to be right. I don't think Putin can win unless the West completely abandons Ukraine, because the Ukrainians will fight. And you have to understand this. The Ukrainian attitude is the attitude of a colonized people who want to fight for their independence. So, the French tried to stay in Algeria. A lot of people said, the Algerians won't keep fighting. The French had killed 1 million Algerians over 15 years. The Algerians kept fighting. The Ukrainians will keep fighting. But it can get very bloody and very messy, and you could have a lot of Ukrainian death if the West does not supply them. I hope the West does supply them, because I think you want to combat this kind of aggression. You want to give it's important to remember this is classic 19th century aggression, where you are invading another country, taking its territory, taking its people, making that part of your country. And that has really not happened that much since 1945. It is a very rare case of classic aggression. And so I hope the West counters it.